Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Hello, story changers, and welcome back to the very last episode of the Isolation Inspiration interview series. We've got a fantastic guest to round off this series that we've been doing during the lockdown period. Her name is Dee Woodward. Dee is the elusive unicorn every entrepreneur wishes they'd met sooner. A brand strategist with years of experience in brand design who leads her clients from unclear idea to unforgettable brand. She's the ballsy entrepreneur's go-to for vision, strategy, design, and expansion. Dee has launched thousands of brands and works with quietly confident entrepreneurs who are ready to brand up through solid strategy, sound business offers, and striking design. When she's not co-creating with fearless entrepreneurs, Dee is likely knees deep in cardboard robot creation and mini supermarket roleplay with the small humans in her life. In this interview today, you will learn when people around you are telling you you're not good enough, keep listening to the voice inside you. That we are all creative people, even if you're more of a left brain person. You need to work far less than you think to be productive. And coronavirus has reminded us of the value of being outdoors. You're going to learn this and so much more in this interview with Dee Woodward.
Well, I'm a designer by trade, and I've always been a designer. That's kind of been my, really since I was kind of about 4 or 5 years old. I think actually the fun thing that I used to do when I was a toddler was to cut out pictures from magazines and lay them in a book and make kind of my own travel brochure. It was all Disney based because I was obsessed with Disney, as any probably 4 or 5 year old was at the time. But yeah, that was my fun. That was fun for me to do, was to lay out and get everything nice and do little annotations and drawings and things around there. So I think I was always going to go into this kind of creative industry that I'm in now. But over the years of since kind of going through graduation and then going into the agency work that I worked in, the way that I viewed the kind of design process changed, and with it I became a bit more kind of commercially aware of how important visuals can be from a brand perspective. So that's the kind of business that I've fallen into now, and it's been this kind of long love journey over many years of me just exploring how important visuals are as a communication tool. So for me, it started as a way of overcoming kind of a lot of confidence issues that I had when I was growing up. I was never really very confident. I would always, hide behind most of other people's opinions. I didn't really have much of my own voice. And it wasn't until I figured out how I could use design and visual language as a way to communicate with people that I really started to take back a kind of confidence in myself. So that's probably a really, really long, weird, drawn out way of saying kind of what I do. I don't like to label myself as kind of like a graphic designer or a brand designer or anything like that, because really I feel what I'm most passionate about is helping people explore how they can show up and communicate who they are. Typically it's in a business environment to the world, because I think everyone has got such a unique kind of essence, a unique thing about them, something that's only true to who they are. And more in this kind of business world that we find ourselves in, especially in the kind of climate we're in now, where I think it's online, connecting to the human part of every business is so important. And that's what I feel I'm most passionate about in my role as a designer at the moment, is helping you connect to the kind of human aspect of your business and showing that visually. Did that even answer your question? I can't remember what the
There's a few things that I can pick out that I think will help answer that question, form this idea. Dee, you were talking about confidence there. Now this is a massive question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think the secret to being confident actually is?
I think it's trusting in who you are and understanding who you are. So for years, I didn't think that I think I had a confidence issue because I wouldn't listen to myself at all. I was listening to so many other kind of perspectives of who I thought people thought I should be, because actually, most people aren't really particularly bothered about what you're doing, because we're all up in our own heads all the time anyway. But from my perspective at that time, I thought that I was supposed to be doing this, or I should be doing that, or people perceived me to need to be doing these things. And I was so kind of consumed with what I thought other people were thinking about me. I didn't allow myself to really connect to and understand who I was, or develop any kind of connection to what my talents were, or what my gifts were, or whatever that kind of word you want to call it is. I ignored all of those things that were true and only I could give to the world. And so I didn't have anything to connect to make me feel confident, because I was just absorbing all of this information from other people all the time, that I didn't really feel like an actual person in that sense, because I didn't have anything at my core that really made me stand out to be who I was. And that wasn't true at all. I was just so disconnected from it, and I couldn't understand or see it, because I was so up in my head with all of everybody else's opinions of me, that I just couldn't be confident. So I didn't have that core belief in myself to be confident.
It sounds like creativity was a real pathway for you, finding this kind of your own personal way and your own personal path, rather than following the scripts of other people. And this is something that I resonate with as you're describing this, talking about this creative outlet. I remember when I was at school, I don't know if you were the same, I didn't consider myself to be a creative person because I wasn't good at the traditionally creative pursuits. I wasn't very good at art, I wasn't very good at music, and that's what I thought creativity was.
Yeah.
And I kept this story in my head for years, well after leaving home and going to university. And eventually I was having a conversation in the pub with a couple of friends, as so often you do at university, and it just kind of came out. And my friend just looked at me and had the most sort of bemused expression on their face. And they said, "David, you've written a book. How can you possibly not be a creative person?" And I went, "Oh shit, yeah." So I think this isn't an experience unique to me, that I think a lot of people downplay their creativity because it maybe doesn't fit into a traditional box of creativity.
Yeah.
What message would you have to people to maybe get them to recognize their creativity in the first place, and then how to nurture that creativity once they've recognized it?
But I think if you kind of hit the nail on the head there, everyone is creative in some form, because being creative doesn't mean that you have to be good at art or, typical things like that. And actually, I studied art and I studied music at school because I love that kind of creative thing. But I wasn't particularly great at drawing. I'm not particularly a skilled artist in that sense. And that's where actually I love going in. I went into the design world because for me, you don't design for business, especially branding for business is not about being artistic. It's about creating something that communicates and connects in a different way. And that is still creativity. If you are brilliant at kind of hosting conversations with people, that's being creative in a way. If you're great, as you say, at writing, if you can communicate your thoughts and express in a way in a written word, some people don't have that ability, and that's a huge creative ability. If you are great at drawing and you're a visual person and you interpret things in a visual way, that's creativity as well. But being creative, there's so many different outlets for that. And I think it's coming back to that kind of understanding who you are and allowing yourself to connect to what your best kind of talents are. It's letting yourself explore what your creative outlet is. And if it's talking, if it's writing, if it's visuals, if it's anything, it could just actually be going out and wandering around and connecting people together, or hosting events, or all sorts of things. There's so many different ways that creativity shows up, and it's allowing yourself to see that, and then you can start to develop it.
Mm-hmm. For you personally, Dee, what do you do to stimulate your creative process?
Well, for me, I'm a visual thinker. So for me, when I talk to people, I will automatically start kind of translating that into a visual sense. So for me to be able to really be my best kind of creative outlet, I have to allow myself space to do that. If I find that I'm kind of stuck in too many roles where I'm not having those kind of creative conversations with people, and I'm not giving myself space and time to be able to let those thoughts translate into kind of a visual world, then I find myself getting really kind of frustrated and feeling trapped in myself. So I know that I need to give myself space to do my work. And I'm quite fortunate, perhaps, or maybe fortunate, or maybe because I worked really hard to make sure that I could do this in my day-to-day life, that my business, my job, my calling, as it were, that I was brought to do, I have made that my work. And so when I go to work, I'm fulfilling that kind of creative outlet that I need to have. So as much as I need a job, we all need a job and we all need to work, I've made it my job be the thing that actually fulfills me in that creative sense, which is quite clever, but also, something that we can all do. And that's what I'm really passionate about as well, with helping people find a way to not just understand what their kind of creative outlet is, but how you can really bring that into your day-to-day life. You can bring it into your work. If you are running a business, especially if you've got a business that you own, you absolutely should be making that business fulfill you in that creative way. So however you're showing up in your business, it should be tailored to your own kind of unique creative output.
Mm-hmm. We've kind of jumped ahead in the story from like your origins to where you are now. I'd like to pick apart some of that journey a little bit more. So you're talking about what you were studying at school, and then going away and working in the agency, and then eventually you've got your business now. Would you like to pick apart a little bit more of what that journey looks like for you, Dee?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'd love to say that it was, brilliantly smooth and perfect and everything that I'd planned for, but obviously that would be a load of rubbish. So if in all honesty, I never thought that I would set up a business on my own. My dreams when I would kind of first set off into the design world was to go and work for a big fancy agency. And when I got to that kind of stage, I realized that actually that wasn't what I wanted. But while I was on that journey to getting there, the confidence issue that I say that I had as a kind of child and growing up got compounded and got worse and worse and worse. And I found myself being put in positions where I was allowing other people to kind of eat away at my confidence. And that sounds weird when you say it, because now I've come through the other side of it. I know that actually it was nothing to do with them. It was all me, because I had full control to be able to take myself out of that situation. But it took me until there was a couple of kind of key moments that changed things for me. And one was when I was working at an agency, and it was all great and it was brilliant. It was on paper, it was a good job. I was making good money. It was a nice team. But in reality, I was going to work every day, and the boss at the time really kind of made it his job almost to make you feel like you were just lucky to be there. So it wasn't a good environment to be in. And to the point where he'd even say, you're lucky to have this job, you can work anywhere else. And it took for me going to Thailand to get married. I think we talked about this before, when I took 3 weeks out, and me and my husband just decided that that's where we were going to go. We didn't invite anyone. It wasn't a big kind of ceremony. It's just what we wanted to do. We just escaped for a few weeks, traveled, got married in Bangkok, and had a couple of weeks traveling around Thailand, which was amazing. And that gave me the space I needed from the life that I thought other people expected me to have, to then come back and quit. And I'd like to say that it was a nice thought out process, but it wasn't. It literally, it was that kind of moment. I came back in, went back to work, and was like, I've changed in this time that I've turned apart. I've realized who I am, which then sounds a little bit like I went to Thailand and realized who I was. I mean, how much of a story is that? But it doesn't matter where you went. It was just that space. It was being away and allowing myself to explore who I really was and connect to who I was. So I came back and I went to go and have a proper conversation and do all the things correctly, but it just, something bubbled up inside of me and was just, I had to escape. And I literally just kind of screamed, I quit, and walked out. It wasn't a particularly great moment, but it was what I needed in that time to really shake things up. I had to change. The little kind of confidence person that was always inside me was starting to really see things properly and think, hang on a minute, you've got a voice, you are good at what you do, you deserve better than the way that you're being treated, so let's change things. So that was the kind of first change. And I I went into setting up my own business. Obviously, we'd just got married, we just bought a house, so I had no savings. I didn't have a clue how to run a business. I had no customers, no clients, anything. I just kind of went into it because something inside me knew that this was where I needed to be. And that was 10 years ago this year now, when I actually made that change and set up my business. So we've been doing this, kind of worked out okay, still here 10 years on, so it was a good decision. But yeah, I went into then a few years of actually building for myself exactly what I tried to escape. I started creating a kind of agency container, and I was attracting the kind of customers that almost treated me and my business the way that I had been treated throughout my agency work, because that's all I knew, and that's what I was still really conditioned to do, and that's what I was attracting in my business. And I kind of saw that, but I was being busy and I was making money, and I thought I had to work hard, and if I got up at 6 and finished work at 9 p.m. and I had to work every hour under the sun, and I was kind of burning myself out, as many people do in those kind of first stages of business. It's not, unfortunately, it's a story that most people probably tell about their first year setting up on their own. And so then that's when the kind of next big kind of life-changing moment happened. And it was around my 30th birthday, and I was going to bed one evening and I fell on the stairs and I cracked my head open at the bottom of the stairs. And so I literally cracked my head open. Husband found me at the bottom of the stairs, and I suffered a subarachnoid hemorrhage. So I was out of action for about a week or so, and everything was hazy, and it literally completely changed. I think the wiring in my brain almost completely changed from that. I don't recommend it. It's not a good way to go about change. But I woke up from that, and I needed to change things practically, because at that time it was only me and my business, and if you were gonna be in hospital for a little while, the business was not going to survive without me. So I had started to make some changes and setting up a different style of business before that happened, but that was a real catalyst for me to go, look, I need to change the way that I'm doing things. I need to create a business that allows me to have more flexible freedom to do what I love. I kept telling myself that I was doing what I was loving every day because I love my job, but you can't work all hours of all day just doing one thing. You need to go and find other creative outlets as well. So I came back. That it took about a year to really recover from that brain injury, and in that time, I almost see it as I had like this bit bubble over my head at the time, because I was living a life where I couldn't really see who I was. It's a very weird experience. I was almost like on the outside looking in on my life during that year. Really weird. It's hard to explain, I suppose, unless you've kind of had that similar type of experience, which a lot of people have in different ways. But it gave me a whole new perspective of who I was, how I treated myself, how I was treating other people, the kind of business I was growing, and really what was important to me and what I wanted to do in my life. So yeah, that was like the huge catalyst and change for me going into this kind of stage of my business, which where I'm at now, I love what I do, but I'm only working a couple of hours here and there at the moment on my business, because I've got a family, 2 small kids, 2-year-old and 4-year-old. And of course, we're still living lockdown life at the moment where, I've got them home all day. And yet my business still fulfills me, still runs a profit without me having to be in it all the time. And while it took probably a bit of an extreme head cracking open situation to get there, the perspective shifts and the changes that came with that, you can obviously go through that in many different ways without having to have such a traumatic experience. But that was the kind of catalyst that got me into this form of my business.
Yeah. I think that space that you were talking about, actually in the very first instance with going away to Thailand for 3 weeks, I think that space is so important, and not taking that space when you absolutely need it and you're redlining, but taking that space at regular intervals is so important. I even had that myself in my business at the start of the year, where I was just overwhelmed. If I'm honest, I was doing too much. I was spreading myself too thin. And actually my sort of key catalyst event, and it sounds a bit horrible, but actually COVID was one of the best things that could happen for me on a personal level, because it forced that space and it forced that change, and it really helped me to slow down and take stock and look at what I was doing, and I've been changing so much in the past couple of months in terms of how I approach things and the way that I do things. But we can't rely on that head splitting incident or that global pandemic to give us that space. We have to create that space for ourselves. With your wiser head that you have now, Dee, what are some of the things that you do to create that space for yourself?
Well, I'm as much as I kind of creative as I am, I'm also quite analytical thinking wise. So I like planning and schedules and things like that. So for me, what it really works, and it's such a kind of simple thing to think about doing, is to actually book in time for space. So I love Google Calendar because it syncs with everything, and I'm a designer by heart, so obviously I have all the Apple products around me all the time. So, but having the Google Calendar, and I really just plan out times for things. So right now things are a little bit different because most of my time is free time or thinking time because I'm with the kids all the time. But when I'm into more of my routine, well, if we ever go back to normal, hopefully we won't ever go back to normal, because I'm hoping that actually I'm with you on the idea that really what's happened with COVID has been such a amazing opportunity for people to really reflect and see how they've been spending their time and how you can actually better spend your time. That really massive commutes going back and forth to offices that people don't necessarily need to be in is not a great use of time. When you can actually be at home, be just as productive, and companies will probably be seeing themselves as more profitable. I know the people that I've spoken to that have realized that actually they are going to change the way that they're doing things with large offices, because so many kind of people can work from home and have a better life balance with work, be around for dinner time with the kids and see them grow up, whereas people miss out on that time. But going back to kind of scheduling is I will always block out days of the month where it's time for me to kind of do some creative reading or things like that, or I always schedule out time when I'm going to go for a walk or I'm going to go and exercise, because those are things that are important to me. I love swimming. Swimming is kind of my meditation, which is obviously, unfortunately, we can't get into pools at the moment. It's made me realize that I need to somehow get space to build a swimming pool at my home. So that's on the
my
next
wife actually, just on that note, she is seriously considering buying a triathlon suit and doing wild swimming.
yeah. There's something about I think being in like a creative and being in a technical kind of world that I live in, being underwater is the only time when I feel like I really get to switch off from everything around me. So there's something so meditative about swimming. But I'm a little bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to swimming in open water. I think I watched, especially in the sea, I think I watched Jaws at far too young an age to. But I love it. I have been tempted by those swim spa things that you can get.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not a hot tub person, but if I can actually swim in it with jets, then I think I could be tempted by that type of thing. But I forgot what the question was now.
Sorry, that was my fault for interrupting you. You were talking about scheduling in time and how you kind of get that space in your life.
So that's what I found really to be a great tool to help me commit to doing things, because otherwise so many other things in life pop up all the time, and it's easy to go, oh well, I'll just spend a couple of more hours working on this project for someone, or I'll just kind of spend a couple more hours doing this thing that I said that I'd go and do, or even like I promised that I'm going to go out for a cuppa with a friend and you don't do that, or you do that instead of taking just time for yourself. So actually sometimes it's better to go, you know what, I need to just sit down quietly with myself for a bit, even if it's just 15 minutes at the moment. Actually, I go and lock myself in the bathroom for probably longer than I need to get a break from the kids at the moment. But even a 15-minute reset of just going, I'm just going to put the shower on and not actually have a shower and pretend that I'm busy taking a break. It's things like that, scheduling those kind of times to allow yourself to reset and fulfill your coming back to that kind of creative output thing, to be able to allow yourself to reconnect with yourself in these ways.
Mm-hmm. Let's do a little bit of future orientation. What are you planning to do for the rest of the year? Because as we speak right now, lockdown restrictions are starting to lift, and we're going through this pattern where hopefully we're kind of starting to go through the stages and things are getting more and more lift. And as you said, things aren't going to go back to normal, and you don't want them to go back to normal. So what are you looking to do and work on for the rest of the year, Dee?
Well, we've decided, although kind of nurseries have started opening and the kids could go back, because we don't need them to at this stage, we've decided that actually we haven't opted to send them back yet. Whether that might change, I'm starting to perhaps regret that decision because, it would be quite nice to
I'm
get them
taking
out of the house
7
for a
full
bit.
showers a day here.
But when I kind of think about it and I think, well, there's other spaces that perhaps people need their children to take those spaces at nursery and schools. And so it didn't feel right to me to want to take a space up that potentially would mean that somebody else couldn't go, or it would make it more difficult with number wise. So in my mind, we've got the kids here full time until September, when it would be the kind of new year. And so I'm hoping that by then they would be able to start going back into nursery of some respects. So I would start to bring a little bit more work time back in the day then. And that's really going to be the change for me towards the end of the year, is to take where at the moment I'm not working in the day, other than kind of popping in to do these odd interviews with people, which is fun. But I'm working on an evening. And that's great for the moment because I love what I do. And actually I can get to the end of the day, put the kids to bed and feel exhausted. But then I come and switch on the computer to start doing some work. And I'm like, yes, I'm excited and full of energy again because I love what I do. So that's okay. That works for me, but that's not going to work long term. And I'm very mindful of thinking that I can be a full-time mum all day and then run a business for a couple of hours on an evening. Technically that could work, but I'm going to go into burnout if I continue to do that for a long time. So I'm very mindful of that can't be a continuous way. At some point I've got to get my evenings back of just being able to, go out for a walk or just switch off and not think about anything for a while, or, mostly watch some sort of rubbish on Netflix, but that's good. Sometimes you need a little outlet of switching off and absorbing other kind of information in a different way and not taking life too seriously all the time. So for me, end of the year up till September, things won't change that much. I'm going to continue to do the way that I'm working at the moment, just a couple of hours here and then on the evening, and then come September I'll just switch my times around, but I won't be going back to full-time day working, not until perhaps the year after next. The plan for me was to always just do a couple of hours here and there and run my business on a few hours a week so that I can spend the majority of my time with the kids until they go to school. And then when I go to school, I'll have some more time to ramp up things in my business if I choose to, or see how things go. It took me 10 years to get to this stage of building the business to a part where that's how I can choose to do things. But that was really the whole goal of creating this business in the first place, was so that I could get to this stage in life and be able to choose when I want to work, who I want to work with, and just do it for a few hours and still bring in the money that we need as a family to support a family.
Mm-hmm. That's just raised an interesting point in my head, actually, that a lot of people, they set goals and they achieve them, but they realize that what they achieved actually wasn't what they really wanted. I know that sounds like a bit of an odd thing, but so many people say, I'd love to leave my job and do my own thing and have my own time. And that's actually exactly what you did. And you said all that you did was you just ended up creating another agency, and you realized you'd achieved your goal, but you hadn't really achieved what you wanted. Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight into this 10-year process? Was there any strategy or planning that you found really helpful to not just achieve the goal that you thought you wanted to achieve, but actually get to what you really wanted to achieve, if that makes sense?
Yes, yeah. And that, I think, where I'm not a fan, as much as I like planning things, I'm more of an in the moment person. And it's great to kind of have a vision for, loosely of what life might be like in 5 years or 10 years. But honestly, if I set a goal that far in advance, it just wouldn't work for me. So I like to set my goals kind of 6 months a year, that kind of thing, even down to just a couple of months at a time, depending, what kind of size goal they are. And for me, what I've just described is my goal at the moment. We're going to get to that part next year. I'll review and tweak and change things. And I think for me personally, having the flexibility to allow myself to change my goals at any kind of given moment is what's allowed me to continue the momentum and the growth. because yes, it's great to set goals so that you know what you're aiming towards, but not to the detriment of thinking, but that's what I'm supposed to be doing because that's the goal I set. You are allowed to change your mind. You can change your mind at any stance. And that's one of the luxuries that we have, and it's the ability to change our minds with our business and our lives, and not having to do the things that even the boundaries that you set on yourself, you can change those at any stage.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about a couple of C words in this interview so far. We've talked about confidence, we've talked about creativity. Let's talk about the C word of COVID-19 and coronavirus. So we are starting to come out of the lockdown and the quarantines and to a certain extent, the fear and uncertainty that we had when it all sort of kind of really started to escalate. Not that we've entirely lost that. How has this coronavirus period affected you, if it has actually even affected you that much?
Well, I think it's given me that, again, that distance that we've talked about, to be in perspective, to be able to take time to take stock of what you're doing and why you're doing it and what's important and what you really actually want to take with you as we kind of come out of this time, and what has really changed. And it's even just really silly little things like where we live with lots of fields and countryside around us. But pre-COVID, typically a weekend would come and we'd go to the mall, or we'd go to the shops and we'd go and have a cup of coffee and we'd buy, sandwiches at Pret or something like that. And that was our weekend. That's what we do, because that was the habit that we got into. Instead, COVID's meant that you can't do that. And what we've actually done is pack a flask and a picnic and walk around all of the beautiful fields that we've got around our house, and go and sit in fields and enjoy each other's company and eat our homemade goods, start baking bread. I think everyone has probably started baking bread over COVID. It seems to be what the world has decided to do. But it's those kind of real simple pleasures and things that I think COVID especially has made people realize that actually we don't need to rely on a lot of the luxuries of the modern world. And there is actually something quite luxurious about connecting to these simpler things, like going for a walk and baking bread and stuff like that. And I think it's given people the space. If it had been over within a couple of weeks, I don't think that change would have been lasting. But hopefully, because it's gone on for so long, it's really allowed people to set new habits. And my desire and hope for the world, and definitely for my own family, is that we stick to these things when we come out of the process, and that we start to go back to some normality, but we don't all jump straight back into what life was like before. That we allow this time to allow ourselves to reconnect to the things that are most important to us, and change some of our habits and keep some of these new habits that we've formed.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've learned during the lockdown period that you found really useful for coping and getting through, and something that you might be continuing to take on even as we start to come out of lockdown?
Yeah, I think going back to that, the idea of space and being able to take kind of 10 minutes or 15 minutes to lock yourself in the bathroom if you need to, is the thing that I would say. That actually, that you don't have to always be kind of on it and on plan and happy and entertaining other people and doing your job, whatever your job is at the time. It is okay to say, look, world, or whoever it is that you're around, I need some space for myself right now, and I'm just going to take that how I need to. And I think that's a really important teaching thing that this has brought to me, is that it's not selfish to need space for yourself. It doesn't mean that you're not a good friend or partner or parent. It means that you are better because you know that if you just take 10 minutes out or 15 minutes or go for a walk or do whatever you need just for yourself, that you can come back and give more of yourself. It's that whole analogy. I think I can't remember who first told me the whole you can't pour from an empty cup thing.
Yeah.
I don't know where that first came from, but I remember when I first heard that, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. That yes, you do need to kind of fill your cup first before you can serve other people. And I think that's been one of my big kind of remembering things that have come out of this period, is that whilst we're in this intense kind of environment and everyone's sensitivity, everyone's emotions are heightened and everyone's sensitive to a lot of stuff at the moment. And that's okay, because everyone's allowed to feel however they want to feel. and you're allowed to take time away from that. You don't have to take on everybody's feelings as well. You can go, you're okay, that's how you're feeling, you're entitled to that. I'm not going to try and tell you to think otherwise, but I'm also not going to absorb all of that. And that's been my biggest learning.
What opportunities do you think COVID and lockdown has given us?
Again, coming back to that opportunity to really look inside yourself and discover and decide what is most important to you and what your skills are, to really look at what your beliefs are, what that kind of inner confidence that we come back to talking about, being able to explore your own self and your personality and what matters to you and your values and your beliefs and all of these things, and really connect to who the human is inside of you and bring that out of this whole experience. I think is going to be one of the biggest advantages of this time, because everyone's been given so much space to reflect. So it's such a great gift, really. Of course, there's also the horrendousness of the actual virus. I'm not trying to I don't want to make light of that situation, that we should all be thinking, yeah, it's a wonderful thing that's happened to us. But I'm a naturally positive person. I tend to always go to the positives in any situation, and that's how I like to cope with things. So I'm by no means trying to brush over the fact that it's been a terrible time for a lot of people, but I think it's also given a huge opportunity to so many people to make a change and make a real lasting change and difference in their lives, in their families, in their friends, in everyone's lives.
I totally agree with that sentiment. This whole podcast series was supposed to be exactly that we know about the bad stuff, we know about the death, and we know about the restrictions, and we know about the fear, and that stuff doesn't go away. No. I always felt we just needed to hear both sides of the story, and we needed both voices because it was too valent towards the negative. So I absolutely agree. Let's talk about the positive stuff, and that doesn't, just because you're being positive doesn't ignore the negative. If anything, you actually need the negative to provide the context for the positive. It's not an either or game, which I think I'm an optimist as well. And I think sometimes people think optimists are just like woo-woo, sunshine and rainbows, think everything that is great. That's not the case at all.
No, we acknowledge and know that there's a lot of rubbish and shit out there, but we also see that all of that is there as an opportunity somehow to turn that into something positive. And there has to be, because otherwise what the hell are we doing here if you can't turn things into a positive? I mean, that's my perspective on it. But yeah, we are the happy people in the room. It's good.
So let's go for high level, big question. What do you think is going to change in the world because of everything that's happened?
Wow, I think coming full circle and all of the conversations that this has led to, it's people that's going to come out of it. Connection, the way that we connect to other people, the understanding that we are all human to human, and that there is positives in the worst of times. Because actually, although there's a lot of reporting on all of the terribleness, there's also so much kind of counter to that. And I think I've seen more people switch on their kind of happy positivity since this, because actually we do all band together as a community. I think one of the great kind of shows of that was the whole, on the Thursday clapping for the heroes kind of thing. I mean, what a brilliant show of the way that actually in the worst of times, there is so much good in the world that people want to come together still and clap for celebrating that kind of thing. But it's a connection as well, because there's so many people at home actually going out of their minds, not able to communicate and connect to people that they want to. I'm actually a bit of an introvert, so I don't really mind the having to stay home and not see people, but I know that for extroverts that's quite a hard thing. And so getting out there and connecting in that way was a way to keep that kind of bond and that relationship. And I think that's a huge change that we're going to see in people, is the ability to really communicate and connect in different ways on a deeper understanding of people and of what really matters. I think that's going to be, that's the huge shift and change in the way that, hopefully, the way that we all band together and become a bigger team and connect to each other and humanize all of these situations and care.
Yeah.
Show that we actually all care a little bit more, rather than being, too concerned with all of the external kind of devices and things that consume us. Even like going back to children being able to go out and play rather than just being on devices all the time. I've seen so much more in a world where we've been told that we have to stay in. People are more wanting to get outside and do things. And it's almost like that's what we are, these rebellious teenagers inside all of us that go, we've been told that we have to stay in, so now all I want to do is go out. But it's allowed people to understand that and appreciate the things that we took for granted beforehand. So now we appreciate the ability to walk around and go to the shops and stuff like that. So yeah, appreciation and connection, I think, is the big shift.
You were talking about bringing what we've been talking about full circle, and I'd like to start bringing our whole interview today full circle, Dee. And this is something that has changed actually for me over this period, purely from a podcasting perspective, is the way that I do this has actually changed. And I used to have a couple of kind of finalizing questions that I'd go through, and that changed with one of the interviews that I did, where it was a lady called Jackie Taylor, and she was talking about how she asks these wicked questions in her work. And I said, okay, let's finish off this interview with a wicked question. And I'd like to give you the opportunity to do the same, Dee. So instead of me asking the questions as I've been doing so far, I want to give the final question over to you.
Okay.
Is there a question that you would like to ask our audience today, or you think the audience should be asking themselves?
Yeah. Well, I think it does go around the entire theme of the conversation that we've had here. I think more than ever, it's time to really be asking who you are, what you want to be known for, and how you want to show up and contribute in the world. So that's my kind of question to everyone, to take time to take stock throughout of all of this time and ask yourself, what change do you kind of want to make in the world? And it doesn't have to be big or huge. It could be tiny. What change do you want to make in the world? Is it within yourself, within your family, within the greater world? But look at who you are and what you want to be known for, and ask yourself those kind of deep questions.
Mm-hmm. So Dee, at the risk of making your evenings even busier than there are already, if there's anyone who's been listening to this and they've resonated with your story, with your approach, and they're interested in who you are and the work that you do, where would you be directing people to go?
Head on over to my main website, which is bydesign.co.uk, which is BYDEESIGN. See what I did there? I put my name in my business name. But that's where, you'll find the most kind of up-to-date stuff from me, kind of blog posts or any series that I've been running. Just did actually, that came out of the whole COVID kind of situation. I just ran a free series called Brand Together, because I'm obviously talking about branding and kind of coming together in this time to really help people reconnect to who they are and what they want to be known for when it comes to their business. So at the moment, although the live round of that, where I was doing kind of coaching in the group, has finished, the recordings for that are available on my website right now. So if anybody does like that kind of style of messaging and they really want to explore what this means for their business and their brand, then I've got a series of 4-part series which you can go and kind of binge watch over there if you want to.
Amazing. Well, Dee, we have talked about many C words in this interview: confidence, creativity, connection, care, COVID. But I think the C words that has really connected with me in regards of yourself is cheerfulness. I think you can talk about splitting your head open and locking yourself in the toilet with a smile on your face. I think that cheerfulness has really just exuded from you throughout this interview. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that and thank you for bringing that into our conversation today.
Thank you very much. That's really kind. That's very nice of you to say. And I didn't realize how obsessed I was with C words. There was a lot of C words.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Dee.
And thank you for having me. It's been really great to chat with you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be, because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.